Usually, like when you talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, the doctor points to it, and boom, the path forward is obvious. You just put in a cast.
We inherently trust things we can, well, categorize, things we can treat with a straightforward mechanical solution.
But then you step into the world of diagnosing global terrorism, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just totally useless. I mean, we are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Oh, absolutely.
It's wrapped up in frightening headlines, intense political rhetoric, and just this profound sense of existential dread. And the danger there is enormous, right? Because if you misdiagnose a disease, the really aggressive cure you prescribe might actually make the patient far worse.
Which is exactly why pushing past all that political rhetoric and looking purely at the empirical data is so vital.
Right.
If you want to understand how a modern terrorist network actually operates, how it is born, how it functions in the real world, and most importantly, how it dies, you have to strip away the emotion. You have to look at the underlying science.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We are going to chart that complete life cycle today, pulling from some incredibly rigorous data. We've got a great stack of sources for you. We're diving into Dr. Mark Sageman's forensic analysis of terrorist demographics, researched by Leonard Weinberg, Ari Perliger, and Audrey Kurth-Cronin on how these groups ultimately collapse.
Some really fascinating stuff in there.
Seriously. And we're also looking at detailed structural reports from Fernando Reinares and Carola Garcia Calvo. Okay, let's unpack this, because when you look at who actually joins these groups, the data immediately shatters, almost every conventional assumption we have.
It really does. Sageman's work is foundational here because he didn't just theorize from a distance, right? He actually built a database of over 500 terrorists to figure out their real backgrounds.
Wow, 500.
Yeah, and the first massive myth that just crumbles is the idea that terrorism is rooted in poverty and ignorance.
Because the public assumption is always that these networks prey on the destitute, right?
Yeah.
Like people with zero economic options.
Exactly. But the data paints the exact opposite picture.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the al-Qaeda social movement, according to Sageman's database, is solidly middle class. And even more surprisingly, the vast majority of his sample actually attended university.
That is wild.
I know. To put the statistical weight of that into perspective, in the Middle East, only about 10% of young Muslims attend university.
Okay.
So we aren't looking at a desperate, uneducated demographic here. We are looking at a highly educated, upwardly mobile subset of the population.
Which naturally brings up the brainwashing myth.
Right.
Right, because if they aren't desperate, the assumption kind of shifts to the idea that, well, they must have been deeply indoctrinated in radical religious schools from childhood.
But again, the database shows only 13% of these individuals actually attended a madrasa.
Only 13%.
Yeah. I mean, look at the second and third waves of global jihadis. Roughly 2/3 of them had completely secular upbringings.
Oh, wow.
Only a quarter were even considered deeply religious during their youth. And if you're listening and thinking, well, maybe they are just lonely, isolated, sexually frustrated young men lashing out.
The classic lone wolf stereotype.
Exactly. Well, 3/4 of the individuals in the sample were actually married.
You're kidding? Married.
Married. 2/3 had children. They held professional or semi-professional jobs.
Okay, so you have a profile of someone who is educated, middle class, secularly raised, and has a family. How does that person end up radicalized?
Well, the actual mechanism isn't, a shadowy figure in a cave handing out recruitment flyers. It's what Sageman calls the bunch of guys theory.
The bunch of guys theory. I like that.
Right. Radicalization turns out to be overwhelmingly a social bottom-up process. It is driven heavily by in-group dynamics.
So it's about who they hang out with.
Exactly. 84% of Sageman's sample were in the diaspora. So expatriates, or second and third generation immigrants, living in a society where they felt a real sense of cultural dislocation.
Like they didn't quite belong.
Yeah. And the crucial mechanism is who they associate with. 2/3 of them were friends with others who joined the jihad, and 1/5 were close relatives.
So it operates much more like getting heavily into a niche hobby or like joining a fraternity.
That is a great way to put it, yeah.
It's driven by this intense in-group loyalty, peer pressure, and shared moral outrage. not a top-down corporate recruitment drive.
Exactly. And the historical data backs this up perfectly. I mean, the infamous Hamburg cell that plotted 9/11 or the 77 London bombers, they weren't recruited from the top down.
They sought out Al-Qaeda.
Right. They were sitting in living rooms, hyping each other up, and then they went looking for the organization. It is spontaneous self-organization.
And the text brings in that specific data from Spain, right, to kind of ground this.
Yes. The Garcia Calvo and Reynarez data on radicalization in Spain between 1996 and 2012. It gives us a very precise timeline for how this happens.
Which is?
The median age for radicalization is 25, and it ferments in intimate, highly social spaces. So private homes, specific places of worship, or prisons.
So it's definitely not a sudden overnight snap either.
No, it is a very slow burn. From the initial stages of radicalization to actually attempting a violent act, it takes an average of 4 to 5 years.
Wow, 5 years.
Yeah, it requires a long period of social reinforcement.
But here is where the model gets a bit complicated for me. If this process required sitting in a living room for 4 years, absorbing peer pressure and building group solidarity, how did this happen in the modern era?
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of these individuals are physically isolated now. We have to look at how the internet acts as like a synthetic living room.
Oh, absolutely. The digital age completely rewired the timeline. Online chat rooms and encrypted web forums basically became the new engines for radicalization.
Because it's easier to access.
Exactly. The internet provides a low-stakes entry point. It's a relatively safe environment for fence-sitters to kind of observe without initially committing to anything dangerous.
Okay, I understand how someone ends up on a forum, but reading a radical PDF doesn't automatically turn you into a combatant.
Right.
I mean, we all know people who act tough behind a keyboard but wouldn't throw a punch in real life. So if they are just chatting online, how does typing translate to kinetic, real-world violence?
It comes down to a psychological mechanism known as the illusion of numbers.
The illusion of numbers.
Yeah. Think about it. In the physical world, if you hold an extreme fringe view, the people around you will push back.
Right. Your neighbors or coworkers will tell you you're crazy.
Exactly. You are forced to interact with diverse opinions, which naturally moderates your behavior. But online, algorithms and user curation allow individuals to actively seek out only those who perfectly align with their worldview.
You completely abandon any space that challenges you.
Right. And when you are in a digital space where literally everyone agrees with your most extreme thoughts, grievances escalate at an unnatural speed.
Because there's no friction.
None. It creates a profound artificial sense of group solidarity. You start to believe your fringe view is actually the silent majority.
Which gives them the psychological courage to do things they'd never try alone.
Exactly.
And the text highlights this fascinating, really specific example of how power works in these virtual echo chambers with the case of Yunus Suli.
Oh, your hubby 07.
Yes, Terrorist 007.
Yeah.
This was a guy with zero combat experience. He wasn't a battlefield commander at all.
No, he was essentially an IT guy.
Right. But because of his extreme technical proficiency online, his ability to set up password-protected forums and distribute propaganda, he became a central leader in the virtual jihad.
He was running the digital infrastructure, and that actually earned him personal praise from Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
Who was a major real-world terrorist leader in Iraq.
Exactly. Suli was eventually tracked down and sentenced to 10 years in prison. But his trajectory proves that leadership in the virtual space became totally democratized.
It represents a complete inversion of traditional power dynamics.
It really does.
Which honestly leads to a very dangerous analytical trap. Because if a guy on a laptop in London can become a key leader without ever visiting a training camp, it's tempting to view modern terrorism as just a random, formless blob of lone wolves.
Oh, completely.
Just a totally decentralized network of random people acting entirely alone.
But assuming the network is amorphous, meaning formless, is a massive security failure.
Right. The expert steps in to correct this.
Fernando Reynarez explicitly argues that while it might look chaotic, global terrorism is actually polymorphous.
Meaning having many forms.
Exactly. It has a highly specific, multi-layered structure with distinct forms that interact with each other.
So if it's not a random blob, and it's not a rigid military hierarchy with a general barking orders down the chain, how does a polymorphous network actually operate?
Reynarez outlines 4 specific levels. At the absolute top, you have the core.
Okay. The core.
This is the reconstituted ideological leadership. Groups like the Majlis Shura traditionally hiding out in the Afghanistan and Pakistan border regions.
But they aren't the ones calling the shots on everyday attacks.
No, they aren't micromanaging daily operations. They're providing overarching strategic direction, ideological legitimacy, and occasionally high-level funding.
Got it.
Then, below the core, you have the territorial extensions.
Okay, I was thinking about this like a global fast food franchise.
Hmm.
So the territorial extensions operate almost like regional master franchisees for a brand.
That is actually a really helpful way to visualize it. You have the core setting the brand vision, the corporate headquarters.
Right.
And then you have groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They claim a specific geographic territory and execute the core's broader strategy using local resources.
But wait, if the core is hiding in a remote border region, how are they actually directing a franchise in North Africa? I mean, they can't just send an email or pick up a satellite phone without inviting a drone strike.
They definitely can't. The communication relies on dead drops, encrypted couriers, and public ideological signaling.
Public signaling, like what?
The core will release a broad public manifesto identifying a general target, say, targeting Western economic interests,
Okay.
and then the territorial extension will interpret that directive and plan a specific local attack to align with it. It operates more like a venture capital model.
The core provides the brand equity and the high-level blessing, and the local franchise executes the operation.
Exactly.
That brings us to the third level, which seems much looser, affiliated groups.
Right, the promotional partners in your franchise analogy.
Yeah, these are organizations like the Taliban or Lashkar-e-Taiba. They share a similar worldview or common enemy, but they have their own distinct, usually localized political agendas.
It's a marriage of convenience. They might share training camps or smuggling routes, but they do not take direct orders from the core.
Okay, and finally, the fourth level.
The independent local cells.
This is the grassroots bunch of guys we started with.
Yes. They are inspired by the movement, they consume the propaganda online, but they have absolutely no formal operational link to the core or the franchises.
They are the unauthorized homemade knockoffs. They see the overarching brand, they get radicalized in their living rooms, and they try to execute an attack using homemade resources.
And Rainieri's issues a major warning here. It is a massive security mistake to only focus on these independent grassroots cells.
Even though they're the ones causing immediate chaos in the cities.
Right, if you only focus on them, you miss the fact that the core still provides vital strategic direction. Because if a plot needs to be spectacularly deadly, the core, or a territorial extension, will still try to step in to provide the necessary technical expertise or funding that a local cell lacks.
Okay, so we have this global structure. But if this structure exists globally, why do some regions experience vastly more homegrown terrorism than others? We have to look at the environment.
Oh, absolutely. The environment matters immensely.
Sageman's data on what he calls the Atlantic Divide is completely staggering. Post 9/11, Europe had over 2,300 arrests related to Islamist terrorism.
Yes.
In the United States, during that exact same period, there were only about 60 arrests.
It's a shocking contrast.
2,300 versus 60.
Mhm.
Even when you adjust for the proportional size of the respective Muslim populations, the arrest rate per capita is still roughly 6 times higher in Europe than in the U.S.
Which is wild because the same internet exists in both places.
Right. The same propaganda is available. So why is the environment in Europe acting as a massive accelerator while the U.S. environment acts as a dampener?
Sageman synthesizes this back to fundamental differences in social integration and policing models. He contrasts the American melting pot mentality with European essence-based nationalism.
Okay, let's break down essence-based nationalism. Because in the U.S., citizenship and national identity are largely ideological.
Right, you can be a hyphenated American.
Exactly. Polling data shows that 71% of Muslim Americans strongly believe in the American dream. The economy is generally more dynamic, allowing for upward mobility.
But in contrast, European nations historically base their national identity on bloodlines, deep historical ethnicity, and shared ancient culture. That is the essence.
Which makes it incredibly difficult for an immigrant, especially one from a former colony brought in originally for unskilled labor, to ever truly be viewed as just French or German.
The structural barriers are much higher. You have rigid labor markets leading to economic discrimination, higher youth unemployment, and idleness.
And these isolated enclaves where people feel systematically excluded from the national identity.
Exactly. And when Sageman applies this data to policing, the divergence becomes even sharper.
Right, because policing is where the state physically interacts with these communities. And Sageman highlights that the U.S. relies heavily on community policing.
Yes, like the NYPD, for example, is incredibly diverse. Its demographics roughly mirror the city itself. The officers are visually and culturally part of the community.
Contrast that with the European model Sageman analyzed, where police forces are predominantly Caucasian, but are often tasked with patrolling North African or South Asian immigrant enclaves.
It creates a visual of an occupying force, an immediate us versus them dynamic right on the street corner.
Now, I want to explicitly note here for you listening, we are not taking a political stance on this.
No, not at all.
We are simply impartially reporting Sageman's analysis that local grievances, especially perceived unfair police actions, are the principal driver in radicalization.
It's just what the data points to. When you take local economic exclusion and mix it with the global moral outrage being broadcast online, you create a highly combustible environment. The local fiction basically validates the global terrorist narrative.
Okay, so we've mapped out how the disease takes root. We see how it incubates in peer groups, structures itself globally, and feeds off local friction. So what is the ultimate fate of these organizations?
Well,
Here's where it gets really interesting.
it does, because the empirical research by Weinberg, Perliger, and Cronin delivers a super counterintuitive conclusion. They almost always fail.
Almost always.
Analyzing over 430 terrorist groups, they found the median lifespan of a terror campaign is just 5 to 10 years.
That's it.
Some experts even say the functional median is closer to just 1 year. Success is incredibly rare.
Wait, how can the median lifespan be just 1 or 2 years when the global war on terror has been this defining geopolitical reality for decades?
Well, the overarching ideology might persist, but the specific organizations themselves are highly fragile. They end through severe repression, failure, or internal fragmentation, or decapitation.
Okay, decapitation. Isn't decapitation, like assassinating a leader, the most obvious way to end a group? You take out the head, the body dies.
It seems obvious, but Cronin's data finds a huge flaw in that logic. Assassinating a leader is rarely effective because it often creates a martyr. A dead leader becomes this perfect, untouchable symbol that validates the group's struggle. Cronin finds that historically, arresting and discrediting a leader is actually far more effective.
You have to strip away the mystique.
Precisely. Look at figures like Abimel Guzman, who led the Shining Path in Peru, or Abdullah Öcalan in Turkey. When authorities captured Guzman, they didn't just quietly lock him away, they paraded him in a cage wearing a striped prison uniform.
Oh, wow.
He looked disheveled, pathetic, and entirely human. It shattered the illusion that he had some sort of divine backing.
And this ties into Cronin's deepest insight, right? That terrorism is actually most effective when governments overreact.
Yes, terrorism fundamentally is political judo. The organization doesn't have the military power to overthrow a state, so they throw a rock, hoping the state responds by swinging a sledgehammer into its own community.
If a government responds with indiscriminate repression, sweeping crackdowns, or interventions that harm civilians, the state essentially does the recruiting for them.
The overreaction proves the terrorists' core narrative.
Which brings us to the actual policy prescriptions Sageman suggests. If overreaction is the fuel, how do you dismantle a network? His answer? Treat them like common criminals.
Yes, you take the glory out of it. Sageman points out that programs like Rewards for Justice accidentally turn nobodies into heroes.
Because putting a multi-million-dollar bounty on someone elevates them into a geopolitical actor.
Exactly. But there is no glory in handcuffs. He also suggests that removing foreign troops from Muslim lands removes the daily visual proof of the occupation narrative.
It removes the fuel of moral outrage that drives the third wave of jihadis.
Treat it as a criminal phenomenon, not a mystical war.
So connecting back to you listening, we've mapped the whole life cycle today. We've learned that radicalization is a highly social, middle-class phenomenon driven by peer groups and moral outrage.
We've seen it's a complex, polymorphous structure, not just random lone wolves.
And finally, we've learned these groups rarely succeed and usually collapse within a decade, defeated by targeted arrests rather than sheer military force. Which leaves us with a provocative final thought for you to ponder on your own. If historical data proves that terrorism is most successful when it provokes a massive, overblown government reaction.
And if arresting leaders is more effective than killing them?
Exactly. How often do our modern political and media narratives accidentally give these groups exactly what they want by treating them as existential military threats rather than mere criminals?
We might be giving them the exact glory they need to survive.
It's something to think about.
Oh.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the consensus, and we'll see you next time.